Millionaire CEO calls to fire cleaning lady, but a child answers. What she says makes him cry. You're about to witness a story so powerful, it will restore your faith in humanity. Comment your country or city below, and let's begin this transformative journey together. The mahogany desk gleamed under the cold, fluorescent lights of the 52nd floor as Alexander Sterling gripped his phone with white knuckles. At 35, he had built Sterling Enterprises from nothing, transforming it into a billion-dollar empire that dominated the financial district. His steel-gray eyes, usually sharp with calculation, now burned with barely contained fury as he stared at the quarterly reports scattered before him. 15 million in losses, he muttered, his voice echoing in the pristine corner office that overlooked the bustling city below. The numbers didn't lie, and someone had to pay for this. Catastrophic failure. His fingers drummed against the leather armrest of his chair, a habit he'd developed during moments of intense decision-making. Alexander had never been one to show mercy in business. Compassion was a luxury he couldn't afford, not when shareholders demanded results and competitors circled like vultures. His reputation as a ruthless executive who could make the hardest decisions without flinching had earned him both respect and fear throughout the corporate world. The cleaning staff file lay open on his desk, a list of names and numbers that represented the easiest targets for cost-cutting measures. Maria Santos, 48 years old, had been with the company for 12 years. Her performance reviews were adequate, nothing exceptional, but nothing terrible either. She was simply expendable in the grand scheme of corporate restructuring. He picked up his phone and dialed her number, his jaw clenched with determination. This was just business, nothing personal. The phone rang once, twice, and on the third ring, someone picked up. Alexander cleared his throat, preparing to deliver the news that would change Maria's life forever. Maria Santos? He asked, his voice cold and professional. But instead of the mature woman's voice he expected, a small, innocent voice answered, "Mama isn't here right now. She's at the store getting medicine for my baby brother." Alexander froze. The voice belonged to a child, probably no more than 7 or 8 years old. This wasn't supposed to happen. He had planned a quick, efficient termination call, not a conversation with a child. "Who is this?" he asked, his tone softening slightly, despite his best efforts to maintain his corporate demeanor. "I'm Lucy," the little girl replied with a natural openness that only children possess. "Mama said I could answer the phone if it rang." "Are you calling about work?" The question hit Alexander like a physical blow. Here was a child, innocent and trusting, answering questions about her mother's employment, while he held the power to destroy their family's livelihood with a single sentence. Alexander's hand trembled slightly as he held the phone, completely unprepared for this turn of events. The child's voice was so pure, so trusting, that it cut through his carefully constructed walls of corporate indifference like a knife through silk. "Yes, I'm calling about your mother's work," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "When will she be back?" "She went to get medicine for Tony," Lucy explained, her voice carrying a maturity that seemed far beyond her years. "He's been really sick, and Mama's been staying up all night taking care of him. She's so tired, but she never complains. She says work is important because it helps us have a home." Each word struck Alexander with unexpected force. He had never considered the human faces behind the employee numbers, the families that depended on the paychecks his company provided. In his world of profit margins and quarterly reports, people were simply resources to be managed, not individuals with real lives and real struggles. "Is Tommy your brother?" Alexander found himself asking, genuinely curious despite the purpose of his call. "Yes, he's only 2 years old," Lucy replied, her voice filling with concern. "He has a fever, and Mama spent all her extra money on the medicine. She couldn't even buy groceries this week, but she said Tommy comes first. That's what mamas do. Alexander's chest tightened. He glanced at the expensive watch on his wrist, worth more than most people made in a year, and felt a strange sensation he hadn't experienced in decades: shame. This little girl was describing a mother who worked tirelessly for his company, yet still struggled to afford basic necessities for her children. "Lucy, does your mama like her job?" he asked, surprising himself with the question. "Oh, yes." Lucy's voice brightened immediately. "She says she's grateful every day because her boss gives her a chance to take care of us. She cleans the big building where important people work, and she's very proud of her job. She says one day, when I grow up, maybe I can work in a big building." Too, the innocence in her voice was devastating. Alexander realized that this child saw his company not as a corporate machine that consumed lives, but as a benevolent force that provided for her family. The weight of that trust was almost unbearable. "Lucy, what do you want to be when you grow up?" Alexander asked, his original purpose for calling completely forgotten. Something about this child's voice had captured his attention in a way that quarterly reports and board meetings never could. "I want to be a doctor," Lucy replied without hesitation, "so I can help sick people like Tommy get better. Mama says I'm smart enough, but school costs lots of money. She's saving every penny she can, even though it's really hard." Alexander's throat constricted. Here was a child with dreams as big as the sky, whose mother worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table. He thought about his own childhood, privileged and protected, where his biggest worry had been choosing between Harvard and Yale. "Your mama sounds like a very special person," he said softly. "She is," Lucy agreed enthusiastically. "She works so hard, but she still makes time to help me with homework and read stories to Tommy. Sometimes she falls asleep in the chair because she's so tired, but she never misses work. She says people are counting on her." The phrase hit Alexander like a thunderbolt. People are counting on her. How many times had he heard similar words from his own employees, words he had dismissed as manipulation or weakness? Now, hearing them from a child's perspective, he understood their true meaning. "Lucy, is your mama happy at work?" he asked, his voice barely audible. "Most days," Lucy answered honestly. "But sometimes she comes home sad. She says some of the other ladies lost their jobs, and she's scared it might happen to her too. She prays every night that she can keep working so we can stay in our apartment." Alexander's hand moved to the termination letter on his desk, Maria Santos' name clearly visible at the top. The irony was cruel. While her daughter spoke of her mother's fears, he held the power to make those fears a reality. What would happen if your mama lost her job? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. "We'd have to move away," Lucy said simply. "Mama says we'd have to go live with Grandma in another state. I don't want to leave my school and my friends. And Tommy needs his doctor here." The devastating simplicity of her response shattered something inside Alexander's chest. This wasn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet. It was about a family's entire world being turned upside down by his decision. Alexander set the phone down for a moment, his hands shaking as he stared at the city skyline beyond his office windows. 40 floors below, people moved like ants, each one carrying their own burdens, their own hopes, their own families to protect. For the first time in his adult life, he was seeing beyond the glass walls of his corporate tower. When he picked up the phone again, Lucy was still there, humming softly to herself as she waited. The sound was so innocent, so trusting, that it made his heart ache. "Lucy, are you there?" he asked gently. "Yes, sir. Mama taught me to always be polite on the phone. She says it's important to use good manners, especially when talking to important people." Alexander almost laughed at the irony. Here he was, supposedly important enough to make life-changing decisions for hundreds of people. Yet he felt smaller than he had in years. This child's simple honesty had exposed the hollow nature of his success. "You have very good manners," he assured her. "Your mama raised you well." "Thank you," Lucy replied politely. "Mama says manners don't cost anything, but they're worth everything. She has lots of sayings like that. She's very wise." Alexander found himself genuinely curious about this woman he had planned to fire. Through her daughter's eyes, Maria Santos wasn't just another employee number. She was a person of substance, someone who taught her children values that money couldn't buy. "Lucy, what's your favorite thing about your mama?" he asked. "She never gives up," Lucy answered immediately. "Even when things are really hard, she keeps trying. When Tommy was born and got sick, and Daddy left us, Mama cried for one night. But the next morning, she got up and started looking for work. She said, we were going to be okay because we had each other." The mention of an absent father added another layer to Alexander's understanding of his family's struggles. Maria was raising 2 children alone, working multiple jobs, fighting to keep them housed and fed while maintaining hope for their future. "Sounds very brave," Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion he couldn't quite understand. "She is," Lucy agreed. "She's the bravest person in the whole world." She says as long as she has her job, we'll always have a home. Her job is like our superhero cape. Alexander's eyes moved to the termination letter again, and he felt physically ill. How could he destroy someone's superhero cape? How could he be the villain in this child story? "Lucy, can you tell me more about your mama's work?" Alexander asked, his voice barely steady. The termination letter lay before him like an accusation, but he couldn't bring himself to end the call. "She leaves really early in the morning, before me and Tommy wake up," Lucy explained with the matter-of-fact tone children use when describing their world. "She cleans the offices where important people work. She says she makes sure everything is perfect for them, because their work is very important." Alexander glanced around his pristine office, suddenly seeing it through different eyes. Every polished surface, every gleaming window, every spotless floor represented hours of Maria's labor. She had been here, in this very room, caring for his workspace while he remained oblivious to her existence. "She must work very hard," he said softly. "She does," Lucy confirmed. "Her hands are always rough from the cleaning, but she says it's honest work. She's proud of what she does. She says every job is important if you do it with love." The wisdom in those words, filtered through a child's innocent delivery, struck Alexander with profound force. When had he last done anything with love? When had he last felt pride in his work beyond the satisfaction of increasing profits? "Lucy, what does your mama say about the people she works for?" Alexander asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to hear the answer. "She says they must be very smart and important to have such a big building. She hopes one day I can be smart like them. She always tells me to work hard in school so I can have a good job like the people in the tall building." Alexander closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility he had never acknowledged. This woman saw him and his colleagues as role models for her daughter, while he had been about to destroy her livelihood without a second thought. "Lucy, does your mama ever talk about her boss?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "She says she's never met him, but she hopes he's a good person. She prays for him sometimes, that God will bless him for giving her a job when she really needed one. She says even though she's never seen him, she's grateful to him every day." The phone slipped from Alexander's suddenly nerveless fingers, clattering onto the desk. This woman prayed for him. She thanked God for him. While he had been planning to fire her, she had been expressing gratitude for his existence. Alexander retrieved the phone with trembling hands, his entire worldview crumbling around him. The child's voice brought him back to a reality he had been avoiding for years, the reality of human connection, of responsibility beyond profit margins. "Lucy, are you still there?" he asked, his voice hoarse with emotion. "Yes, sir. I'm here. Are you okay? You sound sad." The concern in her voice was genuine. This child caring about a stranger's well-being, while he had been prepared to destroy her family's security. Alexander felt tears threatening for the first time in decades. I'm fine, Lucy. Thank you for asking." He paused, struggling to find words. "Can you tell me what your mama's biggest dream is?" "She wants to save enough money to go to college." Lucy replied enthusiastically. "She takes classes at night sometimes, when she's not too tired. She studies at the kitchen table after me and Tommy go to bed. She says education is the key to a better life." Alexander's chest tightened. This woman was not only raising 2 children alone and working multiple jobs, but she was also trying to better herself through education. The courage and determination that required was beyond anything he had ever faced in his privileged life. "What does she want to study?" he asked. "Business," Lucy answered proudly. "She says she wants to understand how companies work, so she can maybe help other people find good jobs someday. She thinks everyone deserves a chance to work and take care of their families." The irony was devastating. The woman he was about to. Fire dreamed of working in business to help others find employment, while he used his business position to destroy jobs. The contrast between their values was stark and shameful. "Lucy, what would make your mama happiest in the whole world?" Alexander asked, though he suspected he knew the answer. "Job security," Lucy replied without hesitation, clearly repeating words she had heard many times. "She says if she could just be sure about her job, she wouldn't worry so much at night. She stays awake, thinking about bills and rent. She says all she wants is to know we'll be okay." Alexander looked at the termination letter again and slowly crumpled it in his fist. How could he destroy the one thing this remarkable woman wanted most? How could he be the cause of those sleepless nights filled with worry? "Lucy, your mama is very lucky to have such a caring daughter," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "No, I'm lucky to have her," Lucy corrected gently. "She's my hero." Alexander sat in stunned silence, the crumpled termination letter in his hand, feeling like a weight that could crush his soul. Through the innocent words of a child, he was seeing himself clearly for the first time in years, not as a successful businessman, but as someone who had lost sight of what truly mattered. "Lucy, what do you and your mama do for fun?" he asked, desperate to understand this family, whose strength and love put his own empty existence to shame. "We don't have money for fun things," Lucy replied matter-of-factly, "but Mama makes everything fun anyway. We have picnics on the living room floor, and she pretends we're in a fancy restaurant. She makes shadow puppets on the wall and tells stories about brave princesses and kind dragons." Alexander's throat constricted. While he ate at restaurants where a single meal cost more than this family's weekly budget, they created joy from nothing but imagination and love. Their wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the bonds they shared. "She sounds very creative," he managed to say. "She is," Lucy agreed warmly. "She says being poor in money doesn't mean being poor in spirit. She teaches me that love is the most valuable thing in the world, and we're very rich in love." Alexander's eyes burned with unshed tears. This child understood concepts that had eluded him for decades. Despite their financial struggles, this family possessed something he had never known: genuine happiness rooted in love and gratitude. "Lucy, what does your mama worry about most?" he asked. "Us," Lucy replied immediately. "She worries about Tommy being sick and about me not having nice clothes like the other kids at school. but mostly she worries about losing her job. She says without her job, she can't protect us. Alexander's hand moved to his chest, where a physical pain had settled. This woman's greatest fear was losing the job he had called to eliminate. Her protection of her children depended on his decision, and until this moment, he had never considered the human cost of his corporate choices. "Lucy, does your mama ever cry?" he asked softly. "Sometimes when she thinks we're sleeping," Lucy admitted, "but she tries to hide it. She says crying is okay, but giving up isn't. She tells me that tough times don't last, but tough people do." Alexander marveled at the wisdom this child had absorbed from her mother. Maria Santos was teaching her children resilience, hope, and strength in the face of adversity, lessons that no amount of money could buy. The phone felt impossibly heavy in his hand as he realized he held the power to either devastate this family or preserve their fragile stability. Alexander's hands shook as he processed the magnitude of what he had learned. This conversation with an innocent child had shattered his carefully constructed worldview, revealing the human cost of his corporate decisions in devastating detail. "Lucy, I need to ask you something very important," he said, his voice barely steady. "If someone could help your mama, what would be the most important thing they could do?" "Make sure she keeps her job," Lucy replied without hesitation. "She says her job is everything to us. It's our safety net, our hope, our future. Without it, we have nothing." Alexander closed his eyes, overwhelmed by the weight of responsibility. This child had unwittingly placed her family's entire future in his hands, trusting him with their most precious asset, security. "Lucy, what would you say to your mama's boss if you could meet him?" he asked, though he wasn't sure he could bear the answer. "I'd say thank you," Lucy replied simply. "Thank you for giving Mama a chance when nobody else would. Thank you for helping us have a home. Thank you for making it possible for her to take care of us." Alexander felt tears streaming down his face, the first he had shed since childhood. This child was thanking him for the very thing he had called to destroy. Her gratitude was pure, genuine, and completely undeserved. "Lucy, what if your mama's boss wanted to do something special for your family?" he asked, his voice trembling with emotion. "That would be like a miracle," Lucy breathed. "But Mama says we shouldn't expect miracles. She says we have to work hard and be grateful for what we have." Alexander's decision crystallized in that moment. He couldn't be the destroyer of this family's dreams. Instead, he would become their miracle. The termination letter lay crumpled on his desk, but in its place, a new plan began to form. "Lucy, I need you to give your mama a message when she gets home," he said, his voice. "Tell her that someone at her work thinks she's very special and that her job is safe. Can you remember that?" "Yes, sir," Lucy replied excitedly. "Mama's job is safe. She's going to be so happy. She won't have to worry tonight." Alexander smiled through his tears, knowing that this child had just given him the greatest gift possible, the chance to be better than he had ever been before. Alexander wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, feeling as though he had awakened from a long, empty dream. The child's voice had become a lifeline, connecting him to a humanity he had forgotten existed. "Lucy, there's something else I want you to tell your mama," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "Tell her that someone wants to help with Tommy's medicine and with anything else your family needs." "Really?" Lucy's voice filled with wonder. "Mama always says God provides, but she never expected it to happen so fast. Are you an angel?" Alexander laughed through his tears, the sound foreign after so many years of corporate coldness. "No, Lucy, I'm just a man who learned something very important today from a very wise little girl." "What did you learn?" Lucy asked with the natural curiosity of childhood. "I learned that the most important things in life aren't things at all," Alexander replied, his gaze moving from the expensive artwork on his walls to the simple family. Photo on his desk. A photo he had looked at countless times without really seeing. They're the people we love and the good we do for others. Mama says that too, Lucy agreed. She says being rich in love is better than being rich in money. But it would be nice to have both. Alexander smiled, charmed by her honesty. You're absolutely right, Lucy. And I think your mama deserves both. She really does, Lucy said earnestly. She's the best mama in the whole world. She works so hard, and she never complains. She just keeps going, like a superhero. Alexander's heart swelled with admiration for this woman he had never met, but now understood was extraordinary. Through her daughter's eyes, he saw Maria Santos not as an expendable employee, but as a hero worthy of respect and support. Lucy, I want you to know that your mama's job is not just safe, it's important, he said firmly. What she does matters. And she matters. Will you tell her that? I will, Lucy promised. She's going to cry happy tears. She hasn't cried happy tears in a long time. Alexander felt his own tears returning, but these were different. Tears of purpose, of redemption, of hope. Lucy, you've given me the most important gift anyone has ever given me. You've reminded me what it means to be human. What gift did I give you? Lucy asked, confused. You gave me a chance to be better, Alexander replied softly. To be the kind of person your mama hopes I am. Alexander sat back in his chair, feeling lighter than he had in years. The angry executive who had started this phone call was gone, replaced by a man who had rediscovered his heart through the innocent wisdom of a child. Lucy, I need to let you go now so you can give your mama those messages, he said gently. But before I do, I want to tell you something very important. You're going to grow up to be an amazing doctor, and your mama is going to be so proud of you. How do you know? Lucy asked with wonder. Because you have something that can't be taught in any school, Alexander replied. You have kindness, wisdom, and a heart full of love. Those are the most important things any doctor can have. Thank you, sir, Lucy said politely. I'll study really hard. Mama says education is the key to helping people. Alexander smiled, knowing that this child would indeed change the world someday. Your mama is very wise. And Lucy, when you become a doctor, remember that sometimes the best medicine is simply caring about people. I will remember, Lucy promised. Mama says caring is what makes us human. As Alexander prepared to end the call, he realized that this conversation had transformed him completely. The termination letter lay crumpled on his desk, but in its place was a new mission, to be worthy of the trust this family had unknowingly placed in him. Lucy, take care of your mama and your little brother, he said softly. And remember, you're never alone. There are people who care about you, even if you haven't met them yet. Thank you for caring about us, Lucy replied with simple sincerity. Mama says when people care about each other, miracles happen. Alexander smiled, knowing that Lucy was absolutely right. Today, a miracle had happened, not just for her family, but for him as well. A child's innocent voice had saved them all. Goodbye, Lucy. Give your mama my love. I will. Goodbye, sir. Thank you for making Mama's job safe. As the line went dead, Alexander Sterling sat in his office, a changed man. Tomorrow, he would begin implementing changes that would transform not just Maria Santos' life, but the lives of all his employees. Today, a child had taught him that true success wasn't measured in profit margins, but in the positive impact one could have on others' lives. The crumpled termination letter remained on his desk as a reminder of who he used to be, while his heart filled with plans for who he would become. Alexander Sterling stood at his office window, watching the sun set over the city as he contemplated the profound change that had occurred within him. The conversation with Lucy had ended hours ago, but her words continued to echo in his mind like a sacred hymn. He had made a decision that would alter the course of not just one family's life, but potentially hundreds of lives. His assistant, Margaret, knocked softly on the door. "Mr. Sterling? I have the employee files you requested, including Maria Santos' complete record." "Come in, Margaret," Alexander said, turning from the window. His voice carried a warmth that Margaret had never heard in their 15 years of working together. As Margaret placed the thick file on his desk, she noticed the crumpled paper in the wastebasket, the termination letter she had prepared earlier. Her eyebrows raised slightly, but years of discretion kept her from commenting. "Margaret, I need you to cancel all my meetings for tomorrow morning," Alexander said, his fingers tracing the edge of Maria's personnel file. "I have something very important to take care of." "Of course, sir. May I ask, what should I tell the board members about the restructuring meeting?" Alexander paused, considering his words carefully. "Tell them there's been a change of plans. We're going to explore alternative cost-saving measures that don't involve terminating our cleaning staff." Margaret's eyes widened in surprise. "Hey." Alexander Sterling, she knew, never changed his mind about business decisions, especially ones involving significant cost savings. "Sir, are you feeling all right?" A genuine smile crossed Alexander's face, the first authentic smile Margaret had seen from him in years. "I'm feeling better than I have in a very long time, Margaret. In fact, I'm feeling human again." As Margaret left, Alexander opened Maria's file and began reading with new eyes. The woman who emerged from these pages was exactly who Lucy had described: reliable, hardworking, and dedicated. Her supervisor reviews consistently praised her attention to detail and positive attitude. There were notes about her perfect attendance record, even during her son's illness. One particular note caught his attention. "Maria often stays late without additional compensation to ensure all tasks are completed properly. She takes genuine pride in her work and treats company property with exceptional care." Alexander closed the file and reached for his phone. Tomorrow would bring changes, but tonight he needed to make one more call. The next morning, Alexander arrived at Sterling Enterprises before dawn, something he hadn't done in years. The building was quiet, except for the soft sounds of the cleaning crew beginning their work. For the first time, he truly noticed these dedicated individuals who maintained his corporate empire while he slept comfortably in his penthouse apartment. He made his way to the security desk, where Frank, the night guard, looked up in surprise. "Mr. Sterling? You're here early, sir." "Frank, I need to speak with Maria Santos when she arrives." "Could you let me know?" Frank checked his clipboard. "She should be here any minute, sir. She's always one of the first to arrive." Alexander nodded and made his way to the employee break room, a modest space he had never visited before. The contrast between this simple room and his luxurious office was stark. Folding chairs surrounded a small table, and a coffee pot that had seen better days sat on a counter next to a microwave that was probably older than Lucy. At exactly 5:15 a.m., Maria Santos entered the building. Alexander watched through the security monitors as Frank directed her toward the break room. She appeared nervous, her hands clasping and unclasping as she walked down the hallway. When Maria entered the break room, she stopped short at seeing Alexander. At 48, she was smaller than he had imagined, with graying hair pulled back into a neat bun, and kind eyes that held a mixture of surprise and concern. "Mr. Sterling?" she said quietly, her accent adding warmth to his name. "Frank said you wanted to see me. Have I done something wrong?" Alexander stood, suddenly understanding why Lucy spoke of her mother with such admiration. Despite her obvious nervousness, Maria carried herself with dignity and grace. Her uniform was spotless, her posture straight. She was a woman who took pride in herself and her work. "Please, sit down, Maria," Alexander said gently. "You haven't done anything wrong. In fact, I need to thank you." Maria's confused. "I don't understand." Alexander took a deep breath, preparing to share something he had never discussed with any employee. "Yesterday, I called your home. Your daughter, Lucy, answered the phone." Maria's face paled, and her hands moved protectively to her chest. "Oh no, sir. I'm so sorry. I told her only to answer if it was an emergency. Please don't be angry with her. She's just a child." "Maria, I'm not angry," Alexander assured her quickly. "Lucy didn't do anything wrong. In fact, she may have saved both our lives." Maria's eyes filled with tears as she processed Alexander's words. "I don't understand, Mr. Sterling. What do you mean she saved our lives?" Alexander leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. "Maria, I called yesterday to terminate your employment. Cost-cutting measures. Nothing personal, just business." He paused, watching the devastating impact of his words on her face. But when Lucy answered that phone, everything changed. Maria's hand flew to her mouth, stifling a sob. "You were going to fire me?" "I was," Alexander admitted, his own voice thick with emotion. "But your daughter—" "Maria, she told me about your dreams, your struggles, your hopes for your children. She told me about a mother who prays for her boss every night, who works multiple jobs to keep her family together, who finds joy in shadow puppets and living room picnics." Tears streamed down Maria's face as she recognized her daughter's innocent revelations. "She told you all that?" "She told me about a woman who deserves so much more than I was prepared to give," Alexander continued. "Maria, through Lucy's eyes, I saw not just an employee, but a hero. A woman who embodies everything I forgot about human decency and strength." Maria wiped her eyes with the back of her hand, struggling to compose herself. "Mr. Sterling, I don't know what to say. Lucy shouldn't have bothered you with our problems." "She didn't bother me, Maria. She enlightened me." Alexander stood and walked to the window, looking out at the city awakening below. "Do you know what I saw when I looked out this window before yesterday? Numbers, profit margins, competition. But do you know what I see now?" Maria shook her head, still struggling to process this surreal conversation. "I see families. I see people like you who depend on the decisions I make. I see children like Lucy and Tommy whose futures hang in the balance of my choices." Alexander turned back to face her. "Maria, I don't want to just secure your job. I want to change your life." "What do you mean?" Maria whispered. Alexander smiled, the same genuine smile that had surprised Margaret the day before. "I mean that Sterling Enterprises is about to undergo some changes, and I want you to be part of them. Not as a cleaning lady, but as something much more important." Maria stared at him in disbelief. "I don't understand. I clean offices. I don't have a college degree or special skills." "Maria, you have something far more valuable than any degree," Alexander said firmly. "You have integrity, dedication, and the ability to raise children who see goodness in the world despite facing hardship. Those are the qualities I need in my organization." Alexander walked back to the table and sat down across from Maria, his expression serious but kind. "Maria, I've been thinking all night about how to make this right. Not just for you, but for all the employees I've overlooked in my pursuit of profit." Maria dabbed at her eyes with a tissue from her pocket, still struggling to believe this conversation was real. "Mr. Sterling, I'm grateful for anything you can do, but I don't want charity. I've always worked for what I have." "This isn't charity, Maria. This is recognition of value I was too blind to see before." Alexander opened a folder he had brought with him. "I want to offer you a position in our Human Resources Department, specifically focusing on employee welfare and support programs." Maria's eyes widened in shock. "Human resources? But I don't have experience in that field." "You have the most important experience of all. You understand what it's like to struggle, to worry about job security, to balance work and family responsibilities, Alexander explained. Who better to design support programs for our employees than someone who has lived those challenges? But my education, Maria began. Sterling Enterprises will pay for your education, Alexander interrupted gently. Full tuition, books, everything you need to get your business degree. You'll work part-time while you study, with full benefits and a salary that will allow you to focus on your family's needs. Maria covered her face with her hands, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what was being offered. This is too much. It's like a dream. Maria, look at me, Alexander said softly. When she raised her tear-filled eyes to meet his, he continued, Yesterday, I was prepared to destroy your family's security without a second thought. Today, I want to help you build a future beyond your wildest dreams. Which version of me do you think your daughter would be proud to know? The one sitting here now, Maria whispered. Then help me be that person, Alexander said earnestly. Help me create a company that takes care of its people, the way you take care of Lucy and Tommy. Help me build something that would make your daughter proud. Maria was quiet for a long moment, processing the life-changing offer. What about the other cleaning staff? The people who work alongside me? Alexander smiled, recognizing the same selfless concern that Lucy had displayed during their phone conversation. That's exactly why I need you in human resources, Maria. You're thinking about others even in your moment of good fortune. We're going to review every position, every salary, every benefit package. No one else will face the uncertainty you've been living with. 6 months later, Alexander stood in the same break room where he had first met Maria face to face. But everything had changed. The room had been renovated into a comfortable employee lounge with new furniture, a proper kitchen area, and family. Photos covering a bulletin board labeled Our Sterling Family. Maria entered the room wearing a professional business suit, her hair styled differently, carrying herself with the confidence of someone whose life had been transformed. Behind her walked Lucy, now 8 years old, wearing a school uniform. From the private academy that Sterling Enterprises' new scholarship program had made possible. Mr. Alexander, Lucy called out, running to hug him with the easy affection that had developed over their monthly meetings. Mama says you have a surprise for us today. Alexander knelt down to Lucy's level, marveling at how much she had grown in just 6 months. I do have a surprise, Lucy, but first, tell me about school. Are you still planning to be a doctor? Yes, Lucy replied enthusiastically. But now I also want to help people like Mama does. She makes everyone at work feel like family. Alexander looked up at Maria, who was beaming with pride. In her new role as Director of Employee Welfare, she had revolutionized the company culture. Turnover rates had plummeted, productivity had increased, and employee satisfaction surveys showed unprecedented levels of engagement. How's Tommy doing? Alexander asked, standing up to greet Maria properly. He's wonderful, Maria replied, her voice filled with gratitude. The new health insurance plan covered all his treatments, and he's completely healthy now. He's in the daycare center you created on the 15th floor. I can't take credit for that, Alexander said. That was your idea, remember? You said parents work better when they know their children are safe and happy nearby. Maria smiled, remembering the early days of her new position, when she had nervously suggested various employee support programs. I still can't believe you listened to all my crazy ideas. They weren't crazy, Maria. They were brilliant, Alexander assured her. The daycare center, the emergency fund for employees facing hardship, the educational assistance program, all of those came from your understanding of what people really need. Lucy tugged on Alexander's sleeve. What's the surprise? Alexander exchanged a meaningful look with Maria before turning back to Lucy. Well, your mama has been working very hard in her new job, and she's been taking college classes at night. Tonight, she's graduating with her business degree. Lucy's eyes grew wide with excitement. Really? Mama's graduating from college? She is, Alexander confirmed. And that's not all. Sterling Enterprises is also announcing something very special today. Alexander led Maria and Lucy to the elevator, taking them up to the 50th floor, where a small crowd had gathered in the main conference room. Through the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city spread out below them like a glittering tapestry. Maria, when you first started working in human resources, you said something that stuck with me. Alexander began as they stood before the assembled group of employees and board members. You said that every person who works here is someone's child, someone's parent, someone's hero. You reminded us that behind every employee number is a human story worth protecting. Maria felt her cheeks flush as she realized this gathering was in her honor. The same boardroom where decisions about layoffs and cost-cutting had once been. Maid was now filled with people celebrating human connection and compassion. Today, I'm proud to announce that Maria Santos has not only completed her business degree with highest honors, but she has also accepted the position of Vice President of Human Development, Alexander continued. She will be overseeing the launch of the Maria Santos Foundation for Employee Welfare. Funded by Sterling Enterprises, but operated independently to support working families in our community. The room erupted in applause, but Lucy's voice could be heard above it all. Mama, you're a vice president. That's like being a superhero. Boss. Maria covered her mouth with her hands, tears streaming down her face. Alexander, this is too much. I don't deserve. Stop right there, Alexander interrupted gently. Maria, 6 months ago, you were prepared to lose everything because of my selfishness. Today, you're in a position to ensure that no other family faces that uncertainty. If that's not deserving, I don't know what is. Margaret, Alexander's longtime assistant, stepped forward with a beautifully wrapped package. This is from all of us, she said warmly. Something to commemorate this moment. With trembling hands, Maria unwrapped the gift to reveal a crystal plaque engraved with the words, "To Maria Santos, who taught us that success is measured not by what we achieve for ourselves, but by what we make possible for others." Lucy read the words aloud, her young voice carrying clearly through the room. When she finished, she looked up at her mother with pride shining in her eyes. Mama, it says you help other people. That's exactly what superheroes do. Alexander knelt down beside Lucy again. Your mama is definitely a superhero, Lucy. But do you know what the best part is? What? Lucy asked. She raised a superhero daughter who reminds important people about what really matters in life, Alexander said, his voice thick with emotion. You saved your family that day when you answered the phone, but you also saved me. As the celebration continued around them, Alexander found himself in a quiet moment with Maria near the windows overlooking the city. The transformation in both their lives seemed as vast as the urban landscape stretching to the horizon. Maria, I need to tell you something, Alexander said quietly, his voice carrying a weight of reflection. Before that phone call with Lucy, I was lost. I had everything money could buy, but I had nothing that mattered. I was successful by every measure, except the ones that count. Maria turned to face him, her expression thoughtful. Alexander, may I ask you something personal? Of course. Do you have a family of your own? Maria asked gently. Children? Alexander's face shadowed with old pain. I was married once, many years ago, Sarah wanted children, but I was too focused on building the company. I kept saying someday when things settle down. But in business, things never settle down unless you make them settle down. What happened? Maria asked softly. She left me 5 years ago. Said she couldn't compete with my ambition for my attention. She was right. Alexander paused, looking out at the city lights beginning to twinkle as evening approached. I had everything I thought I wanted, but I lost everything that actually mattered. Maria placed a gentle hand on his arm. It's not too late, you know. People can change. Look at us. 6 months ago, we were strangers. Now we're family. Family. Alexander repeated, testing the word. You know, Maria, Sterling Enterprises used to be just a company to me. Now it feels like something much more important. What does it feel like now? Maria asked. It feels like home, Alexander replied. A place where people like Lucy can grow up believing that good things happen to good people. A place where mothers like you don't have to choose between their children's medicine and their rent. Across the room, Lucy was showing the other employees a drawing she had made of the Sterling building with hearts floating around it. Her innocent joy was infectious, drawing smiles from everyone around her. She still talks about that phone call, you know, Maria said, following Alexander's gaze. She tells everyone about the nice man who made Mama's job safe. She says angels sometimes use telephones instead of wings. Alexander laughed, a warm sound that had become much more common over the past months. She's not wrong. That conversation was definitely divine intervention. Alexander, what you've built here since then, it's not just a company anymore. It's a community. People feel valued, protected, hopeful. You've created something beautiful. We've created something beautiful, Alexander corrected. I may have had the resources, but you had the vision. You showed me what was possible when business serves humanity instead of the other way around. 3 years later, Alexander stood in the newly constructed Sterling Community Center, a facility that had grown out of the employee welfare programs Maria had initiated. The center offered childcare, adult education classes, job training programs, and support services for families throughout the city. Lucy, now 11 years old, was conducting a tour for a group of visiting dignitaries, explaining the various programs with the confidence and compassion that had become her trademark. Her dream of becoming a doctor had evolved into a broader vision of helping people in all aspects of their lives. This is our medical clinic, Lucy was saying to the group, her voice clear and professional. People can come here even if they don't have insurance. Dr. Martinez says that everyone deserves to be healthy, not just people with money. Alexander smiled, remembering the shy little girl who had answered the phone that life-changing day. That innocent child had grown into a remarkable young woman who understood social justice in ways that eluded many adults. Maria approached, carrying a clipboard and wearing the confident demeanor of someone who had found her true calling. As Vice President of Human Development, she had overseen the expansion of Sterling's welfare programs to over 50 companies across the country. The board meeting went well, she reported to Alexander. 3 more corporations want to implement our employee welfare model. The Santos Foundation is becoming a national movement. Any regrets about leaving the cleaning job behind? Alexander asked with a teasing smile. Never, Maria replied firmly, though I still clean our house myself. It keeps me grounded, reminds me where I came from. Speaking of where you came from, Alexander said, I have something to show you. He led Maria to a wall near the center's entrance, where a large plaque had been mounted. It read, The Lucy Santos Center for Family Welfare, where every phone call can change a life. Maria gasped, her hand flying to her chest. You named it after Lucy? It was the board's unanimous decision, Alexander explained. None of this would exist without that brave little girl who answered the phone and reminded a lost man of his humanity. Lucy finished her tour and bounded over to them, her eyes immediately drawn to the new plaque. "You named the whole center after me?" she asked in wonder. "We named it after the girl who proved that children can be teachers, and that kindness is the most powerful force in the world," Alexander said, kneeling down to her level as he had so many times before. "But I just answered the phone," Lucy protested. "Mama did all the hard work." "Lucy, do you remember what you told me that day about your mama never giving up?" Alexander asked. "Yes." "Well, you never gave up either. You kept talking to a stranger, kept sharing your family's story, kept believing that people are good even when you had every reason to doubt it. That kind of faith changes the world." Later that evening, Alexander found himself back in his office. For the first time in weeks, the space looked different now, warmer, more personal. Family photos covered his desk, pictures of Maria's graduation, Lucy's science fair victories, Tommy taking his first steps in the company daycare center, and countless images of the extended Sterling family that had grown around them. His phone rang, and he answered it immediately, a habit he had developed since learning that any call might be life-changing. Alexander Sterling. "Mr. Sterling, this is Jennifer Walsh from the National Business Ethics Council. I'm calling to inform you that Sterling Enterprises has been selected for the Humanitarian Corporation of the Year award." Alexander smiled, but the recognition felt less important than it would have years ago. "That's very kind, but I should clarify. This honor belongs to our entire team, particularly our Vice President of Human Development, Maria Santos. Mr. Sterling, we've done our research. The transformation of your company culture, the community, programs, the national model you've created for employee welfare, it's unprecedented in corporate America. You've proven that businesses can be both profitable and compassionate. Ms. Walsh, 3 years ago, I would have laughed at the idea that compassion could be profitable," Alexander admitted. "But I've learned that when you take care of your people, they take care of your business. When you invest in your community, the community invests in you. What inspired such a dramatic change in your business philosophy?" Alexander looked at the framed photo on his desk, the first picture ever taken of him with Maria and Lucy, snapped on the day of Maria's promotion. "A little girl answered a phone call and taught me that every decision we make affects real people with real dreams and real struggles. She reminded me that business isn't about numbers, it's about humans." After ending the call, Alexander walked to his window and looked down at the city below. Somewhere out there, families were sitting down to dinner, parents were helping children with homework, and people were dreaming of better futures. Thanks to Lucy's innocent wisdom and Maria's transformative vision, Sterling Enterprises was now part of making those dreams possible. His personal phone buzzed with a text message. It was from Lucy. "Mr. Alexander, Mama says you have to come to dinner Sunday. I'm making my famous grilled cheese sandwiches with help. Tommy wants to show you his new drawings of buildings. He says when he grows up, he wants to build houses for families who need them." Alexander typed back, "I wouldn't miss it for the world. Save me 2 sandwiches." As he gathered his things to leave the office, Alexander reflected on the journey that had brought him to this moment. The angry, isolated executive who had picked up the phone 3 years ago was gone, replaced by a man who understood that true success was measured not in profit margins, but in the positive impact one could have on others' lives. 5 years had passed since that transformative phone call, and Alexander Sterling stood before a packed auditorium at the National Conference on Corporate Social Responsibility. As the keynote speaker, he was about to share the story that had changed everything. God, in the front row sat his Sterling family. Maria, now pursuing her master's degree in social work. Lucy, at 13, already volunteering at the community center and maintaining her dream of becoming a doctor. And Tommy, a healthy 6-year-old who spent his afternoons in the company's award-winning childcare program. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alexander began, his voice carrying the warmth and authenticity that had become his trademark. "I want to tell you about the day a child saved my life and taught me the true meaning of success." He recounted the story of that pivotal phone call, Lucy's innocent revelations about her family's struggles, and the moment when he realized that his corporate decisions had human faces and human consequences. The audience listened in rapt attention as he described the transformation of both his company and himself. "But this story isn't really about me," Alexander continued. "It's about Lucy Santos, who at 8 years old possessed more wisdom about human nature than I had learned in 35 years. It's about Maria Santos, who turned personal struggle into professional strength and showed us how to build a business with a soul." He gestured toward the front row, where Maria and Lucy beamed with pride. Today, the sterling model of employee welfare has been adopted by over 200 companies nationwide. The unemployment rate in our city has dropped to historic lows. The Lucy Santos Center serves over 10,000 families annually. But the most important measurement of our success isn't found in any report. Alexander paused, his eyes finding Lucy in the audience. "The most important measurement is this. Lucy Santos still believes that people are good. After everything her family went through, after all the uncertainty and struggle, she maintained her faith in human kindness. And because she kept that faith, she was able to share it with someone who had lost his way." The audience rose in thunderous applause, but Alexander continued, his voice rising above the sound. "Every business leader in this room has the power to be someone's miracle. Every decision you make ripples out into the world, affecting families, children, dreams, and futures. The question isn't whether you'll impact lives. You will. The question is whether that impact will be positive or negative." As the applause continued, Lucy stood up in the front row and began walking toward the stage. Without hesitation, she climbed the steps and walked to Alexander's side. "Mr. Alexander," she said into the microphone, her voice clear and confident. "May I say something?" "Of course, Lucy. The stage is yours." Lucy looked out at the hundreds of business leaders in the audience with the same fearless openness she had shown as a child. "I just want to say that sometimes the biggest changes start with the smallest voices. When I answered that phone 5 years ago, I was just trying to be helpful. I didn't know I was talking to someone important, but I learned that everyone is important and every conversation matters." She turned to Alexander with a smile that could light up the world. "And I want to thank Mr. Alexander for listening to a little girl who just wanted her mama to keep her job. He didn't just save our family. He showed us that kindness is contagious, and when one person decides to be better, it makes everyone around them better too." Alexander felt tears streaming down his face as he pulled Lucy into a hug. In that moment, surrounded by applause and love, he understood that this was what true success looked like. Not a corner office or a stock portfolio, but a community of people who had been lifted up by kindness and who were now lifting others in return. As they stood together on that stage, Alexander Sterling and Lucy Santos represented the beautiful truth that had transformed both their lives. That sometimes the most important business decisions aren't made in boardrooms or executive offices, but in moments of human connection where hearts open and lives change forever. The little girl who had answered a phone call had grown into a young woman who was already changing the world, one conversation at a time. And the broken executive who had been ready to destroy a family had become a man whose greatest achievement was not the empire he had built, but the love he had learned to share Their story was proof that miracles don't always come from heaven. Sometimes they come from the innocent wisdom of a child who believes that people are good, and the courage of an adult who decides to become worthy of that faith.